Hey, everybody, welcome to the Landcast. I am Nathan, your friendly vice president of Chastain Land and Title. We've got Jeremy, our president, here today. How's it going, Jeremy?
It's going great, Nathan.
Fantastic. We've also got our GIS specialist, Ephraim. How are you doing today, Ephraim?
I'm doing fantastic. I hope you are as well.
Oh, I am doing absolutely lovely. And the reason I'm doing lovely is because we've got a great guest on today. We've got Kyle Walker. He is the founder of Clearfork Intelligence, a Fort Worth-based company bringing geospatial data and artificial intelligence into the energy and land industries. We have a lot to talk about. Kyle is an internationally recognized spatial data scientist. He was named Cardo's 2022 Spatial Data Scientist of the Year. And today he is applying that expertise to some very practical problems. My understanding is everything from mapping mineral and land data to analyzing wells, using AI to automate all kinds of things. So we thought we'd have a fun conversation about what Kyle's up to and AI, data, future of the land profession, and try and dig into what is useful in all of that, what's hype in all of that. And so great to have you on, Kyle. Thank you for being here. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you got into the industry and what problem you saw that eventually led to Clearfork Intelligence?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, thanks for having me on. Really enjoy thinking and talking about all of these topics. I think there are a lot of directions the conversation can go. And getting into my background a little bit, it's interesting. The energy and land space is not where I started out. My background is really originally from an academic background. So kind of came through, did my PhD in geography at Minnesota, did some work as a GIS analyst and, went the academic route. I am a university professor here in Texas, still am. And what I'd been working on, especially in the early part of my career, was building out open source geospatial tools. So, that's originally how I made my reputation, tinkering around, making geospatial software that I found interesting, mostly in the census and demographic data space. And so, a lot of people know me for software I put out that makes it easier to use census data. And once I started putting that out into the world, I started getting consulting inquiries. People would come and say, hey, this is really cool. This can automate our demographic data pipelines. It was really hard before because we're mucking around with spreadsheets and things like that. And it started out with just some, small scale, software coaching. Eventually, kind of the industry where I really first started consulting was in the real estate space because they're so interested in demographics, site selection, trying to understand, okay, what's going on here? What do the population forecasts look like? And I still work in that space quite heavily. But being here in Fort Worth, in Texas, I have a lot of friends in the oil and gas industry, and just having conversations with them on some of the things that they were doing, some of the things that I was doing in the AI space, the mapping space. They told me, wow, we have all of these problems that we're working on. This is so relevant to what we're doing. Have you ever considered applying this in energy or in land? And that's where some of my early connections really materialized. And, ultimately it evolved to the point where I started getting really interested in energy and land data. But really where Clearfork Intelligence launched, because I was, toying around with the idea of, launching a venture in this space. But it was last October, I collected all of the data from the Railroad Commission down here in Texas. And I tweeted out a map that basically showed all of the wells in Texas. So it's something people had done before, but I had this really fast mapping software that I had built. as zoomed in, you can kind of lasso select the wells, show the operators, and that just took off. And I started getting tons of inbound. And all of a sudden I thought, oh, maybe there's something here. And ended up seeing where I could take things. And so, we've been in business a little less than a year, and things are going real well so far, working across the energy and land industry. So land brokerages, mineral buyers, investors, you name it.
That's awesome. I guess similarly, like I actually, so we're in the Midwest now. Our company focuses primarily on the Midwest, oil, gas, mostly just any energy. We have a lot of energy clients, so that's been our focus. But the way I got into it was I grew up in Fort Worth, so
oh yeah,
yeah,
awesome.
just south in Burleson. So I miss it. I miss Fort Worth. I love Fort Worth. It's a great city.
Great city.
And you're right. I mean, it's almost impossible not to. I mean, if you're there, you at least have friends that are in the energy world. Curious what
oh, definitely.
What university do you teach at?
I teach at TCU.
Okay, cool.
I'm in the geography department there. Been there for 14 years now.
Okay.
So it's great place. A lot of great students coming out of there, and happy to talk some about that as well, because we're navigating the AI world at the university as well.
Yeah, well, I would love to. I mean, I think we should get into some of the AI and what you're doing with AI as far as GIS is concerned. I've been a landman now since I was 17, so more than half my life I've been a landman. And back in the day, well, still we still have Net Deed Plotter. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but it's just like you basically just type in line by line. And I remember one of the releases that they had, which was like, and it's not great, but they had it where you could like actually like take a full legal description, put it in, and then click a button, and it would, for the most part, map it for you.
Sure.
And it was not using AI. I have no idea how they did it because I'm not a software guy, but I was like, oh, this is great. But now what AI can do is it's mind blowing. But anyways, I'd like to hear what you're doing with it, with your company at Clearfork.
Where I've been working with clients, and I should just roll that back. So Clearfork it's a young company. Yep. So we're still kind of seeing where to take things, but I call it a services and software company. And so we have kind of two lines of business that we're working on. One is more of a consulting side of the business. And so a client will come to us and say, hey, we're working on this problem. We're interested in using AI in this way, or, we need some help building out some sort of mapping or geographic intelligence solution. Can you help us out with that? And, that's the bigger part of the business. Where we've had a lot of success is in a variety of different projects. So building kind of custom workflows and algorithms for kind of geospatial intelligence, like pipeline and transmission line routing. We've done some of that. Building out a really kind of specific mapping type dashboards that you can spin up a lot quicker these days with AI, that are different from what you would get with an off-the-shelf kind of software purchase, because it's specifically tailor-made to their strategy. On the land side and the mineral side, using AI to kind of hyper target specific areas for acquisition, parse millions of mineral records efficiently, but in specific ways. Reading documents, that's been a big one, and automated run sheet generation. That was really my first project in oil and gas that I did, just kind of running through old PDF files and extracting out information and plotting in a spreadsheet. And then a lot of back office stuff, thinking payroll automation, deal flow automation, deal screening automation, things like that, where people say, hey, we spend a lot of money and we do the exact same thing every single time. Can we consolidate that into something so we can make decisions faster? So that's one side of the business. AI touches all of that, but it'll be fun to get into exactly how it does, because none of this is fully automated. The other side is I'd been building out a couple SaaS products. So I launched my first SaaS product, which is called Wells Intelligence, in March. It's a revenue generating, pays for itself. It's great. And, I've got some early stage customers, but it's basically taking that original tweet that I made with Railroad Commission data, but I pulled down all that data. I pull permits in every day to the platform. I have an API, and customers, they can go in and they can do quick operator searches, decline curves, see production history. So stuff that exists in other platforms. But this was something where people would come to me in oil and gas and they say, Kyle, this is how much we spend on our kind of big subscription that we're using a fraction of. I wonder if you could build something that was just a lot more affordable and did what we needed. So I tried that out and definitely learned a lot in the process. And then I've got another product called Land Intelligence that I'm hoping to release in the next month or so that does exactly what you're talking about. It's, upload a deed PDF, pull out the meets and bounds of the property description, auto match that to, could be PLSS, sections, it could be Texas Land Survey, areas, and accurately draw the meets and bounds at least as best as possible. That has been a harder problem to solve than even I originally thought. And I knew it was going to be a hard problem, but I've been working on that. So those are the two sides of the business and some of the things I've been working on.
That's really awesome. We actually have, I think it was probably 2 years. I think we started our company 13 or 14 years ago. And I think two years into it, Brandon and I were both like, if we could just, because so much of the work that landmen do is repetitive, and I'm just thinking about what we were talking about with run sheets, it's like, we were like, if we could just have something where, and this is way before AI, but it was like, I want to be able to type in my parcel number one time and it generates everywhere it needs to go, so we've been working on our software that we use for doing run sheets and MORs and things like that for, 12 years now. And it's exciting to see how much quicker it's going now that AI is in the conversation, because we can have our software guys take a concept, they can come in and they can meet with us. Ephraim here and I, he and I actually will sometimes just, I'm not a software guy at all, but I can at least ask Claude, to do things. And I can come up with not something that could go into production and our team could use, but I could create a prototype to show somebody like Ephraim or you to be like, this is what I'm thinking about. I mean, AI is just so cool in that it gives people like me, I'm definitely have the vision for something. I just don't have the skill set to, and giving something visual, like what I want. It's been huge for at least for our software. But.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. And I've had the same experience. And frankly, you see this across the board. The cost of prototyping things used to be expensive and risky because here I have an idea. Hey, software development shop, could you make a prototype for us? Oh yeah, that's going to be 6 months and however many thousands of dollars to do that. And then what if it doesn't even work? That's kind of the risk that's baked in. Now, the ability to prototype, even if you don't have a software background, it allows you to, I think, evaluate various opportunities, see what's possible, see what's not. And, on my side, it allows me to see much quicker, okay, what is actually easy and what is actually difficult? Because sometimes you have to get all the way through that process to even realize what the really hard part is. And that's in one space where my business tries to come in. I've had clients, they've said, yeah, worked up this workflow with Claude, but we need to extend it or we need to deploy it, and then I can come in and, really, consolidate the process into something that is, working for them in whatever way that they need. But I agree. I mean, it's a really exciting time where you can bring these ideas to life and see what's possible so much faster.
One thing that I've been encountering now working on developing some of our tools is how much do you trust the output? especially when it comes to like the documentation work and using AI to kind of extract, sometimes 3, 4, 5 page long legals with very specific meets and bounds and trying to map that. How, like, do you have other mechanisms leveraging AI to kind of double check the work, or how do you verify the quality? Kind of that was something that's kind of running through my mind as well. So I'd love to hear from you.
It's critical, and I've got a bunch of systems in place, but at the end of the day, it has to run through me. It cannot be fully automated. And frankly, I even tweeted about this morning, like a couple of things I've been working on this week. Oftentimes your agents, your AI are going to have these blind spots. I think my philosophy around using AI is, there's often this excitement about AI. Oh, wow, it can do everything. I can just upload this into Claude and it's going to do it all for me. It might look like it did, but in all likelihood, it probably didn't. And what I try to do when I build out systems is there are a lot of things that we already have existing workflows that are really good at doing that. We don't need AI to do that. For example, even if you're doing simple things like, for example, if you have text and you're moving that into a spreadsheet, you can write a little program to do that. You don't need AI to do that. If you're trying to map something out and drawing a line or a shape or a curve, we already can use GIS to do that. We don't need AI to be drawing those things. So find the specific things that AI is good at. Maybe that is kind of reading a passage from a PDF and plucking out the right passage, but then decomposing that into something that in turn can become automated. Because, AI, and this is one of the challenges with it, if it's like all of us could ask the exact same question using the exact same words, and we would get 4 different answers.
Yep.
And the reason why we get 4 different answers is it's not, AI is not concrete. It's not going to be repeatable. But, in your line of work and so many of our lines of work, your clients trust you to be accurate. And so you need the same output every single time.
Yep.
And that's where, again, you figure out a little bit what the role is. But it's interesting is, I've been working on a couple projects this week, and been working on one project where I'm plucking out legal descriptions, doing some mapping, and, built out a system using frontier AI models. Everything looked good. I ran it through my typical review process. I have multiple agents looking at, the code and making sure it works. And we run tests and make sure that nothing breaks. Went through the whole process. It mapped the shape correctly that I wanted, but it put it in a completely wrong location. And an automated system would have never caught that because the result seemed plausibly correct. But it has to be something where someone with experience goes in and they look at it over a satellite map or something like that and they say, that's not right. That's not logical. Something must not have worked. And AI still has that human blind spot. And I think that's so important.
Yeah, it's at least for, so like our software, we can upload documents. It'll start reading them for us.
Yeah.
We're trying to figure out prompts to make it a little bit more accurate. But at the end of the day, every single choice that the AI made has to be verified and confirmed by a human. And that's what we teach our people is like, believe us, believe me, we will know if you just sat there and clicked yes. Because while the AI does a very good job and even like, because we do a lot of patent to present, so we're, like old documents, and sometimes you've got poor quality, handwritten and poor quality, but it does a really good job of pulling out.
It does.
But it gets it wrong every now and then. And like you said, there's the human element still, at least currently, that is required with AI and using it however you want to use it, you know. Yeah, I'm curious. Where do you see this all going? I like, as far as GIS and AI, and you know, what is the future of that?
You know, it's so interesting because I personally, being someone who's embedded in this space, and you know, for me to remain competitive professionally, I need to stay ahead of it. Spend a lot of time really trying to think this through and figure it out. Um, you know, where I am seeing things go, you'll have a lot of hype about, oh, all of these jobs are going to go away and they're all going to get automated. I think there are a couple paths that, you know, I see as particularly important. You know, one is there are going to be certain tasks that, if they're repetitive, if they're the kinds of things that can be done at the end of the day with code in some capacity, sure, those tasks will become more and more automated. But, you know, I think a lot about, you know, a couple of things in this space. You know, one is, and I love when people talk about this online, called Jevons paradox, which is kind of the idea that, you know, you have potentially new opportunities that we can't necessarily even envision yet that come out of technology and software. And this is something I'm going to be talking to my students about in a couple of weeks. It's like, there are all of these businesses that exist now post iPhone and the App Store. You know, thinking about the idea of a content creator, something like that, that people can make money doing, that doesn't really exist before Instagram. You know, there are going to be opportunities there. But if we think about kind of what types of skills are valuable, again, being the person who can add that human element, who can provide that careful review. But at the end of the day, I think someone who can maintain human relationships, kind of that's going to be so critical. You know, going into a room and being able to talk to people and being able to make a sale and being able to say, hey, you know, this is the thing that we did and we stand behind it and I can explain this. I think those human relationships are going to be more and more important. Mm-hmm. And in terms of where the technology goes, you know, it's real interesting. I mean, it sometimes feels like with AI, it feels like everything's going so fast, but we often have these leaps. You know, the big leap for me was last November when Claude Code came out, Opus 4.5, which for me was the first, wow, this model can actually do real work, release. We're now seeing, I think, more and more really, really smart AI models that are capable. But for me, that's just been kind of adding on to the capabilities that really changed back last November. So I don't know, that even the more that I dive into this, the more that you discover those edge cases where you think, you know what, human expertise maybe is going to matter even more than it used to, if that even makes sense.
When I was talking to one of our guys who works on our software, he was like, you know, so much of the code that he uses is written by Claude, and he's more becoming like, it's not like his job is no longer necessary, but he's becoming more of like a manager. You know, you're managing this output because, you know, you can't, I mean, with Claude and these things, I'm sure, I mean, I'm not a software guy, but I know in my industry, or the things that we're doing as far as like being able to analyze documents and stuff like that, it's not like our job is going away, but it's making our job quicker. We've actually there's a higher need for us to understand the material that we're putting into AI so that we know, is this right? Is this the correct thing? Like you talked about, you know, you've got to put eyes on it. You got to know that, okay, the shape is right, but it put it completely in the wrong part of the world, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and you got to know that, like, okay, we deal a lot with, which I'd be interested to know if you've been working with anybody in the, like the right of way space, like as far as, transmission lines and things like that, because, we were talking with somebody just a little while ago about, you know, the need for infrastructure. Not only just like we need energy, so we need oil, we need gas, but we also need to redo our infrastructure. We need bigger power lines and stuff like that, especially as we build these data centers. And I know from talking to a lot of people, the need for intelligent GIS in that space is really, really crucial right now. So I didn't know if you have any experience in the right of way world, or, with transmission lines, working with electric companies.
Yeah, a little bit. I'll get into that. There's one point I wanted to jump on that you mentioned. This is something that I've definitely been thinking about a lot. My background is, especially kind of from the academic side, my research was making open source software tools. So I loved coding and being in the weeds with code. And the shift toward being a manager of what these agents do is a big shift, and it has made me develop. I already knew that managing teams, that's really difficult, but it has given me such an appreciation for the skills of a good manager, because if you didn't write the code yourself, you need to still stand in front of a room of people as a manager and understand what happened. Like, what you have your junior hire who did this project. Now you need to stand in front of your clients and justify it and understand it. And that is really difficult. And so I think that particular skill, going back to where things are going, that ability to do that, understand the internals of things that maybe you didn't manually do yourself, those sorts of skills I think are going to be in such high demand. But looping back, I've done some work in the transmission space, working with one client on, building out potential pathways for corridor routing. And, where this comes in from a software standpoint, where it ties in to some of the things that we do. And I tend to be an optimist about some of this stuff. And, we can have frank discussions about it, but this is a great example. What they wanted me to do was build out, without getting too much into the details of the specific engagement, potential scenarios for optimized transmission routing. And for me, and this was something that took into account everything from, energy pricing and population density and land ownership, and things like elevation and just all of the things that you have to think about when you're deciding where to route a pipeline or a transmission line or something like that. And there's software that can do this, and you can do this certainly in ArcGIS or, GIS software. But something that I had long been interested in from a software standpoint was optimization. The idea that you can bring in these ideas from supply chain and operations research and think about it in a spatial way and figure out how to make the most efficient decisions. And, I knew about that from an academic standpoint. I had never been able to code it myself. It was beyond my own coding ability to build that for two reasons. One, writing optimization code was really difficult. And two, I didn't know the programming languages that were fast enough to make it, realistic. If you're evaluating a bunch of different scenarios, you want it to be quick. With AI, I was able to look at this and say, okay, I'm trying to figure out this optimized, transmission line routing workflow. I can go in and I can use these tools now to build out some of the software that I always wish I had, but doesn't exist. And so I spent time doing that. was able to build out that package. I ended up open sourcing that tool. And so it's out there for free if anybody wants to use it. And was able to, have my own workflow that now I had built and understood to deliver on for a client. And for me, that's one of the most exciting things that I've worked on, during my time running Clearfork Intelligence. It's, are there tools that could exist and now you can make them, and now they can actually solve meaningful problems that might have been expensive or difficult to solve before.
When I was actually building a prototype for somebody, I was using a tool, I think it was called Replit or something like that. I don't know if you've ever heard of Replit.
Absolutely.
Similar to like, it's nice for guys like me who don't have like, I'm sure like a lot of you, like, it's like, okay, I'll use Codex for this. I'll use Claude for this. I know like use Claude or Opus for this. I don't know that.
Yeah.
So like Replit's better about like determining like what models it's going to use for the planning stage, what it's going to use for the actual development part. The only thing I didn't realize was that there was a feature that they don't turn off automatically, and you have to, but basically as soon as you run out of tokens, it charges you again. Without even asking you. So I like had it doing like something, and I just put my computer over here, and like I came back like 30 or 40 minutes later, and I was like, man, I'm getting a lot done today. And I looked at it and I was like, it's charged me like $300. And so then I quickly went on and I was like, if I run out of tokens, at least ask me if I want to spend $100 more before you just assume. Because I mean, I know with talking with Ephraim, the amount of tokens we go through when we're working on some kind of prototype or when he's working on something, some new tool for us.
That's like a new dimension that I didn't think I would have to take into consideration, is like resource consumption in terms of tokens, right? So, if you're feeding documents into an AI constantly to map just the input and the output, those are all tokens that that the model is using for that. So kind of optimizing that. I mean, do you have any experience with the thing that I was thinking is where you have more human input so that the AI model doesn't have to do all of the work of analyzing it? If you can, with a regular deed, for example, if the user can actually input the county and certain certain fields, that helps it localize it and makes it more specific to kind of reduce what the AI model actually has to do, especially when it comes to like context information. I mean, do you have any experience working with like resource management, I guess, if you want to call it that?
I mean, that's such a smart thing to be thinking about. And I think it's a useful sense check on the, AI is just going to eat the world and do everything. Because, again, it's easy to get excited about some of the things that you can do. But a lot of it really exposes still the need for smart systems design and systems thinking, which I think it's easy to feel sometimes like it's a shortcut, whereas in many cases, and this is a great example, it exposes the need for having smart processes in place. I mean, something I think that, I think about a lot, and, you guys are obviously thinking about too, is, for one, always asking the question, should AI be doing this job? It's not necessarily a question of can it do the job, but should it be doing the job? And when I'm talking with clients, I have this conversation with them all the time. They'll often come to me and they'll say, hey, we want to do this AI workflow and we want you to have Claude do it. And I'll look at it and I'll say, Claude shouldn't be doing this. What you're talking about is basically doing math, but in an automated way. And, whether it's, in the land business, if, you're figuring out some survey math that is repeatable, just use, a formula or an existing workflow to do the math. Don't ask the AI to do the math. It might come up with the wrong answer. And so being able to separate that out, or, we want the AI to move the numbers from this document to this spreadsheet. Well, you don't need an AI to do that. You can use AI to build a workflow to do that, which is what I'll do. But try to find the things that AI needs to do, which is just what you were saying, Ephraim. It's really smart. And then use existing workflows that already work really well to do the things that AI shouldn't be doing. AI often enables that to happen. But going back to kind of the piece that you're talking about, oftentimes people will come into this and they'll say Claude. They will refer to that as this sort of all-encompassing thing. But there's so many different AI models that you can use. And some of them are optimized for specific tasks, and they cost very different. It's interesting. I've been building out for my land intelligence product, automated workflows. You go in and read a deed, you extract out the relevant information, you draw the geometries. And as I've been doing that, I've been testing it against, frankly, all of the models that I subscribe to. So basically all of Anthropic's models, because they have a bunch, all of OpenAI's models, all of Google's models, and then calculating out a cost estimate. And then I'll have an agent on top run the tests, and they'll report back and they'll say, yeah, you get the best result with Claude Fable or something like that. But it's basically the same results as this really cheap model for what you're doing for this specific task, and it costs maybe 20 times more or 50 times more. Don't quote me on that one, but much more expensive and much slower. And so you'll hear in the press releases, wow, there are these amazing models that can come out and solve unsolved math problems that the best math professors in the world can't solve. Do you really need that model to do the task that you're doing? And so setting up systems that are smart and cost effective, they can save you some heartburn in the future, because, and I haven't evaluated these claims myself, but you'll see token spend from companies where they're starting to look at it and say, we're spending more on AI than we would have spent on a junior employee. And the junior employee, we can grow that person into a senior employee. Will you grow Claude into a senior employee in the future? I'm skeptical of that.
Yeah.
Thinking holistically in that way, I think, is pretty important.
You and Ephraim and, our software guys, they all get it. On my end, like I've said before multiple times on the podcast, I'm not a software guy. I own a company. And for me, it's really easy to get into being like, I'll sit down with our software guys and be like, AI should be able to do this. It should be able to take our run sheet and all we have to do is input a couple things, and boom, the MOR knows how much interest this guy received throughout the history of this land. And I think you're right, because it's like, well, AI, at least in my experience, is not actually that great with math, but it is, like you said, it's good at building a workflow so that we can still get to the end where I can build an MOR off of a run sheet. But but relying on AI to do that is not the best use of AI. AI is good at helping us think maybe through how to get to that point. But like you said, there's still a value to just code, or to, the basics, I guess is my point. And
for sure.
I think it's hard for business owners like myself to actually understand that, because in my mind, I'm like, come on, guys, like, we've got AI now. Surely this should be just as simple as, snapping my fingers.
Yeah. Well, that's a great point. I've run into the same thing. As I mentioned, my first oil and gas client was a land brokerage, and they had me doing run sheets. And that was one of the first questions they asked, because you can do the extraction and you can build the run sheets with AI, and the accuracy was really good. And they said, okay, can you now do mineral interest and chain of title? And I know that there are companies and who are out there coming up with smart solutions to that. But this is one of those things, I had mentioned this before, you discover pretty quickly what is actually easier, at least from an AI standpoint, and what is actually difficult. I tried, and I ran into so many edge cases. And I don't need to tell you guys, you see this stuff all the time. But you're looking at these documents and, oh, guess what? There's a typo here where someone said Southern instead of section in the actual document. A human looks at that and says, oh, I see what they did. That's and so they can interpret that. But an AI is not going to do that unless it has specific rules or instructions to do that. Or you're thinking about conveyance, for example, over time, and how different names change and are abbreviated. This was something that I was going in circles with, where, oh, here's this name. It's, George Smith. George Smith is now G. Smith, is now G. Smith and Sons, and then conveys to his daughter, whose name is Gertrude Smith, but they're both considered G. Smith in the document. And so now it appears to the AI that it's the same person. Yeah. And so the AI says, well, it's the same person, but you actually look at it as a human and because you've been doing this for a long time, oh, that's his daughter. For one, there's no way this person could have lived 120 years.
Yeah.
And so that's where human intuition comes in. And in chain of title, that's where, especially as I was, working on some of these land projects, it really forced me to take a step back and say, let's figure out what the models can do, where they can be helpful, and then frankly, what they're not going to be able to do. And that's, that human intuition, I think it's so underrated. The experience that is baked in over time of seeing all of these documents or knowing what a deal looks like when you're in the room. Things can be, I'll tell my students this, and it drives them nuts because they always want, there should be a correct answer, a right answer and a wrong answer. I say, no, that's not the way the world works. There can be a correct answer that is the wrong answer. That's something I think it's a big risk and you need to be careful with when you're using AI, because it will often give you correct answers that are the wrong answers. Maybe they're the right answer to the wrong question, or they answer with no errors, but it's not actually doing what it's supposed to do. And I think, again, this is a great example of that.
If people, especially in our land industry, if people go wrong in a direction, is it the direction of optimism or the direction of pessimism? Are there more people out there that are negative and antagonistic and scared of this stuff in ways that they shouldn't be? Or more people who just kind of, or the manager that Jeremy's describing, who just thinks it's a magic wand that you can wave and solve any problem?
It's interesting. I will hear and see both of those perspectives, but I think it's hard because a lot of the rhetoric that comes out of San Francisco, that comes out of, these AI companies, and I don't know, is it to justify their valuations or what it is, but you'll hear sometimes messaging that is going to make people uneasy. And maybe they're not being as careful with their words as they should. But, so many of these, white collar jobs, I hear that, especially, overall, you look at unemployment numbers, and again, not to quote me on that because I don't have that in front of me. We're not seeing massive job losses due to AI. We will sometimes see AI as a justification for job losses, but where the vibes, so to speak, are the worst are among young people, coming right out of college, starting their careers. They don't feel good about the job market, and the job market is harder for them than it is for established professionals right now. But they're also hearing a lot of things from these AI companies that, oh, AI is going to come in and, do all of these jobs that you otherwise would have done. And so it's definitely mixed. I think one thing that I've definitely observed, when you actually get into an organization and think about implementing AI, it is rarely as simple as it seems. In part because there are existing structures within an organization that may or may not be able to accommodate that sort of change. I saw this in my first engagement working in land. I was doing run sheets, and landmen typically get paid on a day rate. And so I needed to bill them for days of work. Well, how do you bill for days of work if you're doing 10 days of work in 30 minutes? How do you even figure that out? So there are these existing structures that are difficult to get around. But something I've run into as well, you'll have a conversation with someone, they say, yeah, we want to implement this AI strategy. And they'll say, well, what does your data look like? Can your data actually be fed into the AI to ensure that you're going, there's an old adage that we say, and Ephraim, you've probably heard this because it's in all of your GIS courses, garbage in, garbage out. If you're putting garbage into the machine, you can't expect to get a birthday cake out on the other side. And that is something that you absolutely see. It's like, there's a whole lot of work that needs to be done to even start to really benefit from these tools, because otherwise it's just going to reproduce things that aren't going to work.
I was impacted. I just came out of graduate school about 6 months ago, and there was this fear, even though I had worked as a consultant for a big consultancy firm before I went to grad school. But I think, especially now with this conversation, what kind of became even more clear to me is the fact that AI just changes the skills that young, especially like students going into the labor market, that the skills that they need to come in with, because this managing role and this consultant role that, we talked about earlier, it used to be required on a much higher level, because you had a bunch of junior analysts that could just do the actual legwork. But now, since, with the coding capabilities, with the development capabilities of AI, even the juniors need to be able to consult, right? They need to be able to manage. So that is a huge shift that I kind of noticed. And it was very difficult for me to put like my finger on it, but even through this conversation, that just kind of illuminated itself before me. So yeah, I can definitely attest to that.
That is great advice. I hope everybody who's listening to this and who's going out into the job market listens to that advice, because I think it is so important, especially, Ephraim, you and I come from the geospatial background, and I'll tell people will reach out to me all the time and they'll say, oh, what skills do I need to get going in GIS? Or, my students at TCU will ask me that question. And, I'll tell them, yeah, you need to know the fundamentals. You need to know your way around the software, but don't expect to get a job based on that. 10 years ago, maybe you could get a job based on that. The real skills that matter, and not everyone likes to hear this because it's not always comfortable, especially when you're starting out, but you need to be able to talk to people. You need to be able to put yourself out there and let people know that you exist. You need to be able to show authority and, manage and put together a bunch of ideas and explain things to people. And, even in my classes, what I'm having all of my students do, they don't just submit final projects anymore. They don't just submit technical take-home exams anymore. They have to do a project and then stand up in front of the class, and they need to present it live. No AI agent, for them to ask questions to. Those are the types of things. And going back to that thing about, human relationships and being able to manage personalities and things like that. And so that's what I tell people. Those are the skills that you need to work on. And I think that's still going to be so important, in oil and gas and land, certainly, but really whatever field you're going into.
And I think that that's actually a really good thing. And one thing that I don't think many people would have thought would be necessary of us humans when we first started talking about AI and artificial intelligence, that it would give us, it's not actually going to make us, I'm sure in some way it will, affect our social, the way we socialize with one another. But it actually, like from what you're saying, at least in the job market, it's going to force a lot of us. Well, I like to talk to people, and have a social. I've always liked the acquisition part of land services. Sitting down, negotiating. But it actually is going to force people who are not necessarily that way to become that way. One of a kid who interned with us the last 2 years. He's going to IU here in Bloomington for coding, and I think that honestly, I think being because coding is nothing like being a landman, but I think it was so good for him because he's just a young kid, and he'd prefer to be out in his in the room with his computer doing something on it, But this actually forced him to get out and meet people and do things he would have never wanted to do,
Absolutely.
And so I think that that's actually a really sweet thing about AI. If anybody's scared of AI, hey, it's giving us all, it's going to require a lot of us to become, get good at being around other people.
Yeah.
Be more social.
Exactly. Which maybe feels like a contrarian take, but I really do believe that's true. The more that technology advances, the more building those human skills becomes important.
Are there other assumptions that you see young people coming into the industry with, or starting out their careers with, that you look to help them overcome? Are there other major things where you're just like, if I could get young people to just understand this?
It's a great question, and it's something that in many cases you learn from experience, but it goes back to a point that I made earlier about, often young people want things just to be black and white. They want a right answer and a wrong answer. And, if you're actually in the rooms with people or dealing with these scenarios, you're figuring out, all of the different scenarios that someone's working on in land, how you go and negotiate a deal with one person is going to be, you're going to need to go talk to another person in an entirely different way. Or, here you're working in one particular county and they have a whole set of assumptions that, over in this other county, there's going to be a different set of rules. And so the way that it works over here is not necessarily the way that it works over here. But, being able to understand that nuance, that's one of the things that's hard to dislodge. A lot of kids coming out of high school, and this is in part due to how kids get evaluated these days. I see it with my own kids. It's, there is a right answer and a wrong answer. And I got the wrong answer. And I didn't, I didn't do it this exact way. Well, I got to the right answer, but I didn't do the right steps. And, I'm not to disrespect to teachers or the way that they're doing things or anything like that. It's just, I think, as kids, that's often the way that you teach. But as you're moving into, professional situations, the ambiguity, it's not even just about, okay, there's a right answer and wrong answer. You actually need to figure out what the right answer is and then answer that. And, that's something I think it's advice that I give that is, I think it's challenging to figure that out without putting the reps in first. But I think that's something that's pretty important. And especially just even looping that back to AI, that becomes so critical because you type in a question to the AI and you get back an answer and you say, wow, super intelligence told me that this is the right answer. No, you need to be able to evaluate, did you ask the right question? And did it answer the correct question, or just did it answer the question that it interpreted you asking? And that's complex and uncomfortable, but it's, I think, really important.
Well, is there anything else? You've already been very generous with your time. Is there anything else that we should have asked you about, or that you'd like to highlight about the work that you do? Or
If I could just flip it back on you guys. You guys have been talking about your work. I'm just very curious, kind of, what are the biggest bottlenecks that you're seeing in your work? You guys have talked about it a little bit, but what are the biggest bottlenecks in your work that you're addressing with AI, and what are the biggest bottlenecks that you haven't yet been able to solve with these tools?
One thing that's helpful about it is that there is the ability, at least in our industry, to bring in people that have different skill sets, and maybe they don't know, maybe they've never been in the land service industry, but because we're able to move at such a quick pace, with AI, we're able to, at this point, we can go and, here in the Midwest, I know Texas, a lot of the documents are online at this point, but here in the Midwest, it's very hit or miss. I mean, you may have a county that goes back to the 60s, or a county that only goes back to 2004 with documents available. So, we are oftentimes in courthouses and digging through it. But right now we're working on this intake system where people can upload all these documents, like maybe 400 pages at a time, and the AI will just go ahead, or the software would go ahead and start extracting the different documents and putting them into our system, so that when they get back, they can actually go ahead and start, the review process. Right. So I think that it's allowed us to have, allowed us to be able to spend a lot more time training people in a better, more useful way than we used to have to, because used to, it's like, dude, you're getting thrown into the deep end.
Right.
But we're able to move quicker now, and actually, like, still, we're still moving at a quick pace, but we can be more intentional in how we train our employees to do things. AI is always going to be, no matter what prompt I give it, it's still, every now and then, it's just going to decide it's going to do its own thing. So, like, like, standardization is really important to us, as far as like the way everything's written. And there's still occasions where AI is just like, I'm doing it different this time. I know you told me to do it this way, but I'm going to do it different. There's been softwares out there that have come up and, around, but like, I really do believe that, the ability to take a deed calls and upload them into something, and having AI or having something automatically generate onto an aerial image would be huge for landmen. Because there's so many times our landmen are like, hey, I'm not sure if this is my parcel or not, like, this legal has changed and I need to know. And it's like, forever it was like, okay, well, send me it. I'm here at the office. I'll put it into Net Deed Plotter and I'll give you my best answer. With that, from now, we can at least see it over an aerial image, but that kind of stuff will be huge for landmen. There's still going to be, you're still going to have to go to the courthouse and dig through all these, old documents and print them well. But I think that tools to be able to use, or to be able to help landmen in the field, is really big for us right now, trying to figure out, like, what is the most valuable thing that we could build for our guys out in the field, to be able to help them. One of the things that we have, so on our system, when we upload our documents, I think we use, is it Gemini 2.5 or something, Flash? So it's really cheap, and it just is, all it's doing is trying to extract data, and it does a really good job. And one of the things that happens a lot is, like, our employees will be out, and it's really difficult if you got like 500 documents to read every single one.
Absolutely.
And to note that, like, oh, this one has an XREF or a reference to another deed that I need to get. AI is great at that. It's great at reading through this and being like, hey, here's all the deeds you gave me. Here's 15 that were referenced that I don't see you got, So those are some of the things that we're trying to do to help our team, is just like, thinking through, like, how I've been there. I know what it's like to make a mistake when you're at the courthouse. and come back and realize you forgot something. How do we help them not have that happen?
One of the challenges for me is something you actually mentioned already, is to actually when to decide when I should go with, just using an AI model or an automation, because those are not the same things, or just a simple formula or, very simple code. So it's like kind of making that decision that I have to work through, because, there's some demands for the business, what kind of tools make sense. And in many cases, it's something very simple that, you might use AI to prototype, but it doesn't have to be a part of the actual application, for example. And that's very cost effective. And it's also very useful because you're not, using a shotgun to swat a fly away, essentially. So I think that's kind of the thing I'm still trying to learn, is when to just use something much simpler for a simple task, essentially, and not to always use AI, because I'm human, I'll read the news. There's a lot of AI hype everywhere, and I am just as vulnerable to some of the marketing around it, especially when it comes from these companies as well. So trying to kind of filter that out and use the experience that I have, and the competence that I've kind of accumulated over time to say, okay, no, this, AI I could use it, but there's something much simpler and much less complex that I could use. So kind of working through that, that's one of the things that I'm in the process of learning, I would say.
All right, I have one more question. What's your favorite restaurant in Fort Worth? Favorite place to eat?
That is a great question. There are so many great places I love to go. So, my favorite Mexican place is probably Maria's on University, which is just north of the university. Love going to Press Cafe. It's sit outside on the river. Of course, it's 100 million degrees in Texas right now. And then for any of you with TCU connections, Dutch's has all-time best cheeseburgers at Dutch's, so you can't beat that. So those are some of my favorites.
Cool. My brother graduated from TCU, so he'll be happy to. So Brandon, my brother, and I own the company together, and he graduated from TCU.
Nice.
So he'll be happy to know we had a TCU.
Yeah, good DeFrog connection.
Yep.
Thank you for your time, Kyle. This is awesome. And
if you're on X, Twitter, or whatever it's called these days, you should find him. He's his what is your handle? I forget. I can probably find it right now.
It's at Kyle_E_Walker. Cool. I'm pretty active on there. I'm posting energy land stuff, but I also post real estate stuff and demographics and AI. Find me on LinkedIn. That's a good place to connect. If you want to learn more about Clearfork Intelligence, I'm at clearforkintelligence.com. And, my land AI work is at clearforkintelligence.com/land. You can sign up for updates there, send me an email. Love to hear from anyone. But yeah, connect on social, connect through my website. Would definitely be interested in talking more about this.
Fantastic. Cool. Yeah, please reach out to Kyle, folks. We will link to all that stuff in the show notes. And thank you very much. Have a great day, guys.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you so much.
Your time.
The Landcast is a production of Chastain Land and Title. For uncompromising accuracy in land work across oil and gas, commercial, telecom, energy, and more, check us out at chastainland.com. If you enjoyed this conversation, please leave us a review and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. And join us each week as we keep telling the stories of the land industry.